All right, today we're looking at this very curious little dripper. It's called the Flower Dripper Deep 27 by a company called Cafec. This dripper is the narrowest, tallest version of their flower series of drippers. This is another one. This is actually their 50th anniversary flower dripper. And you can see when you look inside, it has this flower type petal shape to the ribs that are inside here. This one is 60 degrees, so that's very similar to like a Hario V60. They also have a 45 degree flower dripper. It's a little narrower, and this one takes that like right to the very extreme with this like 27 degree shape. It's made out of Triton plastic, which is one of the best food safe plastics out there right now. And it uses these, they call them Abaca filters. Cafec, if you're not familiar with them, they're very famous for their filters. I love using them. They taste great. These ones are no exception. Now, this dripper and the filters were sent to me by a Canadian retailer called Cafune. They're fantastic. And whether you're in Canada or the US, these drippers are gonna run you just under 20 bucks. So very reasonable price. And the question that you have to ask on seeing this is, why is it like this? Like, why do we need to do this crazy shape when all the other pour over drippers seem to be more in this shape? And the reason for that, at least on paper, comes down to the original philosophy of the design. Originally, drippers like this were designed for a lot more coffee, 3 to 4 cups. You would have a very thick bed of coffee in there. They would do, traditional Japanese hand drip style. Then as the pour over world changed, people started doing less coffee, smaller doses, 20 gram dose is very common these days. I do less, like 15 to 16 grams. Some people do even less than that. That makes this shape of brewer a little trickier to work with because that bed depth decreases, which means the coffee is going to do less self-filtering. Like the filtering layer of the coffee itself is going to be a lot shorter, instead of maybe this far, it's going to be like this far. What this dripper does is it really narrows it up so you take a smaller volume of coffee and it will actually give you a taller height of self-filtering when it comes to the coffee, which is very interesting because it's actually almost the opposite approach to the UFO dripper, which I also recently reviewed on this channel. That dripper really widens out the bed to try and promote as even an extraction as possible across all the grounds, control bypass very tightly to manage the flow. This one really relies more on that self-filtering process to impart a unique characteristic in the brew. And that it does, and I think the best way to show that is to actually just brew a cup of coffee. So we're gonna stick our filter in here. I'm just gonna give this a little bit of a pre-wet. I've got 8 grams of coffee ground and weighed up here. I'm gonna put that in. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna show you what's worked really well for me. You can try it at home. In my experience, this dripper is very forgiving. So however you end up going about it, it's probably gonna be a good situation. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to bloom with 40 grams of water. And I'm just gonna do small little circles there in the center. And I'm gonna let that bloom for a full minute. I tend to do those very tight little circles, but circle pour, center pour, as far as it goes on this dripper, there's not actually a huge difference because it's so tight in there. So I was able to get pretty good results with either style of pour. I have seen some people grinding like super fine, like trying to push the grind as fine as they can. I didn't find that gave me the best results. I found that made it a lot easier to over extract. I'm going just finer than pour over on the ZP6 here. I'm at about like 4.5, somewhere in that range. So at the minute mark, I'm gonna do a second pour here, really slow, just going in little circles. And I'm gonna pour an additional 30 grams up to 70 grams. That should take me about 10 seconds. And then I let it draw down over an additional 10 seconds. And I do my second pour, again, really slow, another 30 grams up to 100 grams total. Take around 10 seconds. And then again, I'll let it draw down over about 10 seconds. Now I'm at about 1 minute 45, and I'll do a final 30 gram pour again, just going really slow up to about 130 grams total water. That's about a 1:16 ratio. And I've drawn down just right around the 2-minute total brew time. And that gave me pretty favorable results overall. Let's see how it tastes. Really well balanced. Some nice acidity coming through, but like this extremely sweet, like a candied sweetness almost. Very good. Very well balanced cup. It almost gives me like a rock candy kind of vibe. And that's something that I've really enjoyed about this dripper. Like, it's not the most hyper clear dripper that will give you, you know, pinpoint layers of flavor separation. It really brings this nice and distinct character to the brews and brings those coffees to life in a way that is pretty unique to this style of dripper, especially doing a dose that's small. I've not found another dripper will pull out some of those characteristics in the same way. On very intense processed coffees like this one is from Corvus. It's a natural anaerobic, so very intense processing. Yeah, it's very like tart on the nose even before I grind it. And in some drippers, you know, like a fast flowing flat bottom dripper, it would be very intense acidity. And sometimes I like that. Sometimes I don't like that. This takes that acidity and just kind of wraps it in that candied character that really makes it favorable, in my opinion, to those really intense types of coffees. However, what I will say is on the washed coffees, I also found that it would do the same thing, like it would give you that balanced round presentation, but there would also be this layer of brightness on there that was just kind of sliding in the top. And again, providing a complex but distinct profile. Very nice all around. So typically I've been doing those pulse pour style recipes where I'm just pouring a little bit, letting it drain out, you know, prevent filling it up all the way, which helps manage bypassing out the sides. Whatever I did though, I found the results were pretty favorable and pretty forgiving. And I will also say that I was never able to stall this dripper in any of my testing. I went crazy fine, too fine, more fine than you should, so that it didn't actually taste good anymore. Never had an issue with stalling. That's a good situation. It can do larger doses. However, I really did find that the sweet spot for my experience anyways was in those smaller doses, you know, anywhere like 6 to 12 grams. I found this dripper really provided something at those low doses that other drippers struggled to. And that can be great in a couple circumstances. Number one, you have a lot of different coffees on the go at any given time. This is totally me. And you feel like you want to have more than 2 or 3 cups a day, but you don't want to totally overload yourself on caffeine. So if you want to have like 6, 7 cups a day, you do like 6, 8 gram cups. That's a very reasonable amount of coffee to drink, and you can enjoy a wider variety of coffees over the course of a day. Another very practical case is if you get a very expensive coffee and it comes in this little tiny bag and you don't want to blow through it in half a dozen brews. With a dripper that will represent these small doses extremely well, you can really stretch that bag out over a longer enjoyment period. Now, a couple caveats here. Even though, because it's so narrow, a circle pour is very similar to a center pour, it still isn't really the pouring style that Cafec advocates for, and that's called the osmotic flow pouring style. It's basically what you'll see if you look up traditional Japanese hand drip style. It's not how I brew, and it's different enough that I feel like that brewing style on its own could use like a whole video. So if you want to see that, let me know in the comments. Second caveat. If you are here watching this video and you're trying to figure out, I'm just getting into pour over, what's the first pour over dripper that I should get? I will say this is pretty inexpensive and it is a good option. I also always recommend for people to get their first pour over dripper to get some 60-degree pour over conical dripper, be it a flower, be it a V60. You know, there just is going to be so many more resources on the internet as you're trying to learn how to do pour over well that is really more centered around that 60-degree shape. And that being said, for less than 20 bucks, this is a pretty nice add-on. Now, a couple things that you may want to consider as like, let's call them potential negatives when you're looking at a dripper like this. Number one, currently this is plastic. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if Cafec does something with a different material down the line, but for some people, I know plastic, when it comes to hot liquids, is a bit of a non-starter. This is as good of a plastic as they have out for this right now, but still, it's plastic. Second, these filters right here. These are made by Cafec. As I said, I love Cafec's filters. They have this huge range of filters to suit different styles of brewing and different styles of coffee. However, when it comes to the Deep 27, they are currently only providing one type of their filters. It brews great. It was flexible across a wide range of coffees, but if you're a hyper Cafec filter person, just know that they only have one version of their filter available for the Deep 27. Also, they don't recommend you kind of folding over their other filters to fit in here because it's going to impact the brewing character of the cup. Just something to consider. Also, because of the shape, cleaning is actually a little tricky because, you know, it's hard to get a sponge or a cloth like right down in here when you're cleaning this out. And even this bottom section, you know, there's these ribs that will kind of give it some structural support, but it is tricky to kind of clean in all those nooks and crannies really well. And on that note, because of that unique shape, you know, the opening up here is really quite small. So if you're using a grinder with a large dosing cup, it may be kind of a little tricky to dose into here, or even like rinsing your filter or pouring, you know, depending on the style of kettle, that can be really tricky. Cafec makes a kettle that has this long kind of drooping spout designed really to give those slow vertical streams that you would see in a Japanese hand drip style. This type of kettle will more kind of pour out like this. So I have this kettle half full, which allows me to tip it over a little bit more before the water starts coming out. But you can see even there, it's kind of coming out on an angle. And especially if your kettle is like really full, you could like overshoot a little bit. That was a little exaggerated, but I have spilled a couple times just because it's a lot narrower of a zone to shoot for when you're trying to wet a kettle. So, you know, just be aware of that. It's very minor, but wanted to mention it. The thing that really gets me about this though is how good of a job, and not just that, but how consistent it is at really well representing a coffee in a very small dose. And on top of that, the character that it gives to a brew is very unique. That the way that it presents that sweetness in a coffee and can take what can sometimes be an unpleasant acidity and wrap it up where you still get some definition, but it just is a very approachable, sweet package. That is a very nice character. Would I choose this as my only pour over dripper? No, I don't think I would. However, am I going to keep this around for the right moments and the right coffees? Absolutely. For my opinion, for less than 20 bucks, this is one of the better buys that is out there in pour over coffee world right now. So it gets my vote. Now, I want to hear from you. What questions about the Deep 27 did I leave unanswered? If you watch my channel regularly, I would love to know what videos you would like to see from me. Also, if you do watch my channel regularly, one of the best free ways you can support me is just to hit that subscribe button if you find my videos helpful. Let me know your thoughts on this dripper in the comments. I hope your next cup of coffee is fantastic, and we'll see you next time.